So this is about performance testing on FileMaker Cloud. So the assumption with this webinar is that most of you have kind of understanding of FileMaker Cloud already, or you have half a clue about it. FileMaker Cloud is this product/service from FileMaker Incorporated where they're basically creating a FileMaker server up on Amazon's AWS data center infrastructure, right? Pretty cool. And so this presentation is largely about understanding the tiers of the entry-level tiers of servers and how much performance can you really drive through them, and also giving you a potential methodology for doing your own testing if you want. So the running conversation was, so this is Amazon's AWS infrastructure. Is a photo from, it's hard to get into these places, literally armed guards and biometric 007 James Bond kind of security. It's pretty intense stuff. We were having concerns about, really not so much concerns, but people say, I have 5 users or 10 users or 20 users. What server that Amazon has should I use? And the cool part, of course, is that it's really easy to change the servers to more power or less power and more money and less money per month based upon what your needs are. It's one of the, in my mind, the biggest benefits of the cloud, because normally you have a FileMaker server, you just buy the server and the size is the size you have, and you might have overbought, but you don't know that until later. And if you've underbought, you find out later and you have to buy a bigger server. It's not necessarily fun. So T2 instance, what is a T2 instance? It's a class of instance. The T2 indicates it's a class. These occupy the 3 lowest tiers in the FileMaker availability. So there's like 50 instances that Amazon has. You can go and rent one of those 8. And so with those 8 instances, the first three entry-level positions are the T2 small, the medium, and the large. And so this is our virtual little FileMaker tool that shows you just the instances that you need and the pricing that's appropriate for these, etc. So this is another, Margaret, if you can find the link for that one too at some point and pop that up for people if they're interested in that. But this is a tool, and you can press the button up here and it'll refresh the data for the latest pricing. You can select the region over here. But it's interesting to note that the T2 small, medium, and large, these are the entry-level positions. And of course, FileMaker likes to quote these prices right here, which is $18, $37, $75 a month. But that is on demand. If you actually go and commit to a 1-year payment or a 3-year payment program with them, the prices go way down. The prices go down. Instead of $18, $37, and $75, you got $9, $18, and $35. So it's more than a 50% savings. So there's a lot of interest in these. The question is that they say they're burstable here. And that really begs the question, what is burstable? And what does that really mean in real metrics? So the T2 instances are designed to provide moderate baseline of performance and then the capability to burst above it to 100%. So if you have a machine, an AWS instance, they assume that you will most of the time live at or around 20% of the processor or less. However, they will let you burst for limited periods of time up to 100% or whatever you need to get the job done. If you're doing a big report or something and the FileMaker server is busy, you can, of course, go above the 20%. It does it automatically, but it'll only let you do it so much. The idea is that some people build Amazon instances and they're doing video compression, they're doing all sorts of things, and they spin up the Amazon instances with the anticipation they're going to run them at 100% all the time. And FileMaker servers almost never run 100% all the time, and if they do, bad things are happening, right? The performance is horrible and people are calling. So this is really a good fit for the FileMaker community. And after I dug into it more, I realized how good of a fit it is, and we actually tested this. So there's actually real metric testing that we're going to get to in this. So once again, the T2s are intended, this is their definition for workloads that don't use full CPU often or consistently, right, but need to burst. That's exactly what the FileMaker servers need to do. So, yeah, so of course the biggest benefit to the T2 is the cost. You're renting a slice of this machine over here. This machine is a giant rack. There's all these blade servers in there. They're Linux machines, and you're renting a slice of that. And a T2 slice is smaller because you're not going to use 100% all the time. And so as a result, you can save quite a bit of money with that. And of course, because more people can share that system, then the cost goes down, and that's the whole idea of a fairly inexpensive server. In fact, the costs here, for the most part, if you go back and look at the pricing, especially if you commit to a 3-year term, the prices get into the range of what people were paying with shared hosting. Okay, so if you had shared hosting and you had shared hosting with an SSL certificate, the prices are pretty comparable in a lot of ways. So I know that shared hosting went away with 15, but if you look at the numbers, they're in the same ballpark. They're typically less than $50 a month. So, and it varies in there from, say, $15 a month to, you know, $40 or $50 a month if you have a bigger one. Okay. So here's the important part, and this is the mechanics of the bursting. I want to discuss the mechanics of the bursting. Once you understand this, you'll know how to measure this and look at this yourself. The idea that you buy as much server as you need, and so as a FileMaker developer, a mid-level or senior level developer, you're going to need to understand the idea of what a T2 is, how it bursts, why it's relevant, and maybe how to look at that information. So once again, we're going to focus the conversation this point forward on the T2 small. That's the 5-person entry-level server. And really, can it handle 5 people, and can it really handle WebDirect? FileMaker says don't use T2 small with WebDirect, but we're going to investigate that. And not only that, you know, the tips and tricks that we learned to manage and measure this are the same tricks that you're going to use for a T2 medium and a T2 large. So we're going to focus on small, just because this took me about a day to do this as it was, so I was going to just limit it to that. 1 CPU credit. So we have these things called credits. They're like Monopoly money credits, right? It's a Monopoly dollar. A CPU credit is the equivalent of 1 processor running at 100% for 1 minute. That's a super important idea. So 1 CPU. So if you have 4 CPUs and they're all at 100% and they run for 1 minute, that's 4 credits. So not the machine, 1 CPU for 1 minute at 100%. So if you run it at 50% or 75% for a minute, then it'd be like a half a credit. And they prorate it and measure all this stuff out to the millisecond. It's really kind of interesting what they do. So this chart right here shows the T2s that are available. Now, FileMaker does not make the T2 Nano and the T2 Micro available because they consider them thoroughly underpowered servers. Now, the T2 Micro will work fine if you could get it. It'll work fine with like 1 or 2 people. But beyond that, it's just too gutless. So the T2 small is the entry-level position here. I don't worry about the initial credits too much. I mean, that basically means when you spin it up, they give you a block of credits just to start things off. So as you're installing stuff, you get the initial performance to get things going. Normally, you earn 12 credits an hour. So you earn 12 minutes of 100% CPU every hour. And they collect. They're like minutes on your, if you have a rollover phone plan where you have your minutes and you run them roll over month to month, that's the idea. And of course, they roll over and they pool up to a maximum of this number over here. Since we're talking about T2 small, it's 288 credits. In plain English, that's 6 hours of a CPU running 100%. Okay, once again, with FileMaker, we never run 100%, but that's what that is. It's 6 hours. And so, of course, over the course of 6 hours, if you didn't earn any more, you would run out. At 288 would run out. But the thing is, every hour you're getting 12 new ones. Even if you're at 100% and you're kind of depleting down, you're still getting 12 new ones added to your account. But they give them to you, and of course they take them right back out of your bank account, right? And there is a bank account in here, a little CPU credit account. We're going to check that out and show that to you. Of course, you can see with these other more expensive instances, you get 700, the larger pool that you can use from. Now this, by the way, keep this in mind right here, is 40%, but understand that the way they measure this is that every CPU represents 100% available horsepower. A T2 medium and a T2 large have 2 CPUs. That means at any given moment, both processors could give you 100%. Well, that's additive. So it's 100% plus 100%, so you could burn 200% power at one time. Right? So the single CPU on the small makes it easier to mentally do the gymnastics, but the 40% really translates to 2 processors, each running about 20%. So once again, the 20% is the same, except with the T2 medium, you're getting 20% on 2, and on the large, this works out to 30% on 2. And so the baseline moves up a little bit with each of these here, because on the medium, because you get another processor, on the large, because it's 30%. And once again, you get to bank more. But understand, these dual processor machines will burn much faster, right? So that's what that's all about. So what are the problems with the instances? Well, it's not really a problem, but we wanted to measure this. We thought it might be a problem. And generally, for most FileMaker use cases, it's never going to be a problem. And that is because if you run the instance at 100%, probably people are backing up. People are backing up. Okay. However, if you run it at 100% or 80% or 90% or whatever, the users might sense a slowdown, and B, you're starting to burn your credits. Now, it's okay for bursts, but if you're running the machine continuously like that, and you're going to see us where we did that, then either your users will be squealing and unhappy, or the server will slow down to 20% because you've used all your credits up. And then they're going to really squeal because instead of them being up at 80, 90, 100%, the server's topped out at 20%. So the whole idea is that if you burn them all up, the downside is that the server will slow down and it will cap you at 20% until you earn your next credit. And then it will allow you to burn that credit if you want, right? Of course, if you get into that situation, you probably need to buy a bigger server on a monthly basis and upgrade. So I'm just going to do this in a screen slideshow. So real quick, so this is the AWS console you can see here. We're going to log into our account. I could do this live, but I'm just going to do screenshots here. The whole idea is that you're always going to select this EC2 option up here at the top. And then what happens is that you select the EC2 instance. It'll say live instance. You select it, and up comes your one instance or 5 instances or how many servers you're running. And what ends up happening is that down at the bottom there's a tab called monitoring, and this is a bunch of pre-canned little charts that are up there for you that are really kind of cool. And the two bottom charts are CPU credit usage and the CPU balance. But if you look at these, basically this is the balance is the one where you've got how much in the bank, and once again it tops out at 288. Any credits you earn above 288 just go away, right? You don't retain those. You can't build a bank account of thousands of credits. The usage is kind of your rate of change, right? It doesn't show the credits you're earning, but it shows the ones you're burning. And so notice here it says 0.05 and 0.1 and 0.2, or up to 1 or 2, and it'll show you on every 5 minutes, a 5-minute update on these charts. It shows you how you're burning that, right? So it's a rate change chart as opposed to the total piggy bank balance chart. So what is the capacity of a T2 instance? Okay, this is the nuts and bolts of it. We ran basically 3 tests in a live test against a T2 to discover what we had here. This is the same studio lab environment, but I stole all the laptops from my engineers here in Santa Clara for a couple hours over the weekend, and we ran this test. And so the idea was that we needed some sort of standardized test to run on each machine, so it created a load on the server, which is what we did. Now, it's important to understand, in order to do tests, you have to have some sort of metric to run. And so what we did is I sat down and kind of thumbed out what the metrics, the typical user look like. Now, if you're sitting there at the user group meeting, odds are you're not typical. So I want to be clear that this is not about you. It's not about me. It's about the average user, maybe your customers, or if you're an in-house developer, the people that you support in the organization. And what we did is we came up with a typical experience. So first is that we wanted a routine, a script that would run, and it does things and it pauses, and it does things and it pauses, and back and forth, and it runs for about a minute and then it's done. It runs every 5 minutes to simulate that the person is taking phone calls, doing stuff, and every 5 minutes they interact with FileMaker. Okay, and so then the idea was that each of these would run that routine. And so what we did is just to create a benchmark, and this benchmark is available on a download that Margaret's going to post. It's in a copy of Starting Point with like 200,000 or 300,000 records in it. But I needed a situation that was kind of cookie cutter basic that you would see most average users doing. Okay, most average users are not running 20-page highly complex reports as a daily operational kind of thing. They just don't. If you're an admin or a special power user and you run reports, that's fine, but that's not normal. Okay, most people don't spend all day grinding reports. That's a special use case. So here's what we did. So the script does these things. I'm not going to go through the code in the script. It's there. If you want it, you can download it. It's totally free. It's a kind of a version of Starting Point. We did a find. Now, the records that we're finding against are 300, 400,000, so it's a pretty good group. It's an index find. It isolates 200 records, okay, and it does it randomly. So it randomly grabs a letter, sticks it in the last name, and comes up with these records. It does a sort. Notice the sort's pretty limited to 200 records. I generally tell people for performance, try to avoid sorting. However, some people will sort little bits, so we had to kind of put that in there to show kind of an accurate representation of what people would do. Then what we do is we assume that the person was looking for someone, they couldn't find them. Therefore, we add a new contact record. And what we end up doing is we put in some random contact information into this, and then so in each of these steps, there's like a pause, like 5 or 6 or 8, 10 seconds to simulate the person looking at the screen. It's not a script that just goes 100 miles an hour, because people don't do that, right? It needed to be a script that kind of mimicked what people do. It creates a new related note. Pause. Then it puts in 40 to 100 random words into the note, and it does it types a word in, and there's like a second or half a second pause, and then it does another word. So you actually see it going, kind of filling it and typing it in. Then we insert a photo. This is kind of important. A lot of people want to do digital document management contracts, so what we did is we insert a random photo from this photographic website. Once again, this is in the code. You can look at it. If you insert the same document over and over, FileMaker Smart, it sees that document as being the same document, and it doesn't store another copy. It references it. So if you take a single contract or single document and you put it in there like 20 times, it's only really, for the most part, in most situations, going to save it once and reference it the rest of the time. So we needed a different image in there every time. So that's what that does. Then it creates a new related invoice. Once again, it's not so much that it's an invoice, it's just creating a new related record and a related table. Then it creates a new child record, right, with some random data in there, and it inserts random information and a random price, a random quantity. And then what we do is we actually export a PDF to the user's desktop. It's interesting because the PDF is actually, when Pro or Go does this, it causes the biggest spike that we see on the server. It about typically 15 or 20%, just briefly, when someone does that on this layout. And it's just a single page print invoice, but creating the PDF, it has to download the entire contents of that layout, right? So then it returns to the contact layout, and then there's more pauses in between here, and it executes what we consider the phone call, the simulated phone call. So someone gets a phone call, and I train my users that if they get a phone call, they pop a new window, and they take care of that so it leaves their other window intact, and so they can come back that later. So it pops a new window in the contact database. It does another find. Once again, it creates, it does a new window. It basically does a find. We do another sort. And then what we do is we jump to a list view, which we haven't done before, and we scroll up and down a bunch, which causes FileMaker to send blocks of 25 records at a time from the server to the client. That's the way FileMaker moves data. It moves basically 25 records at a time. And that, of course, changes a little bit from version to version, but typically they send a block of data anticipating that you might move up and down a little bit. It sends all the data for those fields except containers. I don't know if that's a test question on certification or not, but basically it sends all. So if you have 1,000 fields in there, it's going to take 25 records times 1,000 fields minus any containers, and it will send those to you. It only brings the containers down when you actually need them on screen. So then it closes the window, returns home, and then it pauses for 5 minutes and it repeats. So that's our testing script. So a very kind of classic user situation. T2N says test 1. This is the where the rubber meets the road. So we did 4 Pro connections and 1 Go connection. I had an iPad Pro sitting there in that photo. Can't really see it, but Go and Pro put about the same level of load on the server. They're very efficient clients. There's little variations in them, but for the most part, the server sees the same kind of load. WebDirect's different, but Go and Pro are largely kind of this lightweight client because it's all heavy on it's a fat client, but the communication, the load in the server is fairly light. So that's what we did. We set this up. So what I did is I had 5 machines, and I would start one, and then I wait a minute and start the second one, then I wait a minute and start. So that way they're all kind of spread out. And there's a little bit of randomness in the performance of the machine. Some of them were high speed, some of them were lower speed, and then there was some randomness about the number of words that would go in. So they would kind of be separated, and a couple times they'd all get together and be running the script at the same time. And it really was okay. So the reality was, with the script that we have, the scenario that we had, because it was performance optimized, we weren't running sub-summaries all the time, we weren't running unstored calculations, we weren't doing unindexed finds, we weren't doing giant sorts. Largely, the performance was 3 to 5%, and you can see that right here. And this is actually at 5%. What you'll notice about this chart is these numbers it always rescales, which throws you off because this looks really bad, except that this number is 5%. And then once in a while you get to 20%, but really the T2 small totally handled without a problem 5 users. In fact, you could go more than 5 users. So once again, questions over there, Jonathan, just feel free to yell and interrupt. So We didn't really push above 5 or 6 machines. I did 6 at one point, and it was almost negligible. Once again, understand that this is using starting point, and we specifically engineer it to be really efficient. Performant would be the word. We don't do unhealthy things. Now, we actually have a script in here that what we did is we take the fines out, the regular index fines, the beginning, there's 2 of them in there, one for the contacts and the one in the new window, and we actually made that unindexed on this unoptimized. And then we didn't do anything else like sub-summaries and stuff, but I did unindexed fines because users will do that, especially if they're less experienced. The T2 small still handled that pretty well with 5 people, but you were starting to see the end of how far it would go because you start getting spikes to 70 or 80 or 90% because the server is doing the find for you, right? The server does the find. So when you do an unindexed find, the server does it for you under most conditions. There's a little kind of exceptions to that if you're using a weird get function, but for the most part, the server does the find, sends the data back. So the server will chug while it's doing an unindexed find. It takes it 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. You'll see that spike, but it was still within the realm. And of course, anything above 20%, it starts to burn usage credits. And so here was the usage credits. And the thing is, these charts are averaged, right? So over these ones right here are average 5 minutes. The one back previously that's every 20 seconds or so. And the reality is that it's actually going up and down like this. And that's kind of averaging it out and flattening it out so you can kind of see the trend. So what happens is you realize down here is that it's burning 0.04, 0.08, 0.1 because for a little split second, the performance of CPU jumped out above 20%, so it burned a little bit, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, it burned a little bit. Listen, it didn't even have an effect on the bank. This is the bank. You can see the bank level. We started the test on a Sunday afternoon, literally, and we let these tests run for an hour. And at the level at which we did the optimized script with the index finds, we never burned enough for this to move at all. Then we did the unindexed searches and did that routine, and it would burn really slowly. Like if you did it for an 8-hour day, and this gets into the idea of where the T2 fits in a FileMaker world, it would burn it down over the course of the day to maybe down to 250, maybe if you were running that really hard all day like that. So because it never was really that high at any given point. Now, if your FileMaker business goes home at night, and it's not doing anything, then that gives your piggy bank a chance to recharge back up. So you'd have to use it down, and then you would have to continue to use it at night, so some sort of process running, and it never gives a chance the server to catch its breath really and to build up your reserve. So if you have a operation that runs beyond 8 or 12 hours, I mean 12 hours would be okay, but you really run beyond that time and you don't really, you maybe have a shift in Europe and a shift in Asia, and they're all accessing the server and doing stuff, you're going to need to get above a T2 probably because you're going to overuse the server. But if you have a normal business where they actually go home and have a life and the server doesn't do much, if anything, then that gives a chance to recharge. So you saw that. That was all pro connections with the efficient script, without the efficient script. Then we did 2 pro connections, 3 web directs. So they were all 5 running simultaneously, and the scripts would run correctly on WebDirect. So it's a good it gives you an idea. It's a good representation. And so this is basically, I think, the maximum load that you can put on a T2 small, at least with this. You really, 1 or 2 web directs, 3 web directs, especially if they're using it, I think you're going to over push. All right, so this is what happens right here. You can start to see this screen right here, and you can see the percentage down here at the bottom. It's tagging 100%, and then it's hanging out there because there's nothing else it can give it. Guaranteed, this is a bottleneck that your users will see. In fact, most of the time, I guarantee that anything above 20 or 30, 40% will result in a little bit of a bottleneck to them. Maybe unnoticeable. Largely, it was unnoticeable below 60 or 70%. Above that, there's one CPU on this machine, one processor, so multiple requests get stacked, right? So if it's doing a find, especially an unindexed find, it's taking 15 seconds, the next person in has to wait 15 seconds for that first thread to clear. If you have multiple threads, multiple processors, then each processor can do its own find for different users at the same time. But that's, of course, assuming they're accessing and doing the same thing at the same point. With 5 people and they're somewhat random, most of the time during the day, they never hit at the same point, right? But they would be spread out. But really, this right here is basically 2 pros and 3 web directs, and really we're pushing it too hard. I think 2 web directs would be about the max. FileMaker, of course, if you have a very ugly database that's never been updated, it's not optimized, it's heavier, then maybe 1 direct would kill this thing. It just depends, right? I'm just telling you a starting point. It's highly optimized. It's efficient. It's something. Shoot, we just totally rebuilt it in January for efficiency. So when you jump to 5 of them doing web direct, pretty much it would hang out at 100% and then dip down. The low was 60 and then it'd go back up to 100%. And you'd start to see these burn rates, and you can't really see it, but it's starting to trend down here. And more importantly, you would see, here's what you start watching. This is your actual rate of change, and it's burning one unit over 5 minutes. And then here it's burning somewhere between 1 and 2.5. And really that's where you're going to get. You're going to get to a point where you're burning the absolute maximum amount. And then if you do that, you're going to last 6 hours, and then it's going to go down to 20%. It'll cap you at 20%. So really, 5 people could totally be semi-efficient on a small. If you have 10 users on a small, they better be running real lightweight, real efficient code like starting point without pressing reports and sub-summaries and stuff, especially if each one's kind of using it actively during the day. If they're using it separately, like this person accesses it every 30 minutes, this person's every hour, and then some person's every 15 minutes, then you could easily stuff 10 people in there. But you're going to want to be able to find these charts and look at them. So my thoughts were, going into the test, was that you would run into a spot where you could easily run these down to 0. It's extraordinarily unlikely you'll run them down to 0, especially if you have a business that runs 8 or 10 hours at a time during the day and then it recharges at night. Also, if you're running it down, you're running the processor that high, you're going to have people complain that the performance is already slow. So just to keep that in mind. Now, typically the math, once again, just to cover the basic math here, and this is the T2 small, you earn 12 minutes of 100% every hour. So 60 minutes an hour, 1 hour at full power will burn 48 credits because it's the 48 plus the 12 you would have earned, right? So it burns a net 60, but it actually takes your piggy bank down 48. So thereabouts, you could go about 6 hours during the day at full throttle. And once again, if you're at full throttle, get a bigger server. But that's the reality of this. So we have links for the copy of Starting Point here that has a test in it. We do have a question.
So the question is, what is the bandwidth needed to get reasonable performance?
Well, okay, so the bandwidth coming out of the Amazon data centers is going to be pretty much more than you can use for these things. So basically it's going to be broadband down at your end. To do this test, we're on a mid-level business line. It's a Comcast line here in California. It's 100 down and 50 up, or whatever it turns out to be. But we never remotely tax that with this thing. So that's not a problem in terms of the internet. FileMaker actually, for the most part, is pretty efficient in terms of it sending data back and forth, especially Pro and Go. And also that's why we rebuilt the layouts for Starting Point. That way they were super optimized, less objects on the screen, got rid of unnecessary artwork, and that helps WebDirect run faster too. So just broadband, I would say, is a short answer. But I think you're going to run out of server before you run out of bandwidth as a general rule.
Richard, we have a question here.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you upgrade your capacity from small to medium or medium to large, does it change anything in your configuration, like in terms of your IP address?
Okay, so here's the deal. If when you upgrade the instance, you log on and change the instance, it will literally spin down the instance and spin it up. It will be a new IP address. However, pretty much at this point, everyone should be using the DNS that you will be assigned. For example, the server that we are running here, so I'm actually logged on to it right here. This is actually the database running on the small. If I hit Open Remote, here it is right here. Our server is RCC Test 10. And so that front part is the DNS that you will have. Even if you get a new instance and you upgrade the instance or downgrade the instance, that DNS entry will always stay the same for you. The IP will change, at least in the current release of FileMaker Cloud. It's not what they call an elastic IP. An elastic IP in Amazon world is basically a static IP. We don't have access to those yet, but it's really, for my position, not really an issue because the DNS entry is consistent.
So do you have to change the DNS entry, or does it do it
it's
for you
automatic. It's totally
Okay.
automatic. So if you use DNS and you have launcher files that use DNS, no one will ever know that you changed the server, ever. If
Great.
you try
We
to
have
hard code it to an IP, then yeah, you're going to have problems.
Okay. We have another question here, Anton. Okay, so the question is about the CPU credits. If you change your instance, do you lose any CPU credits you've accumulated?
Yes. So, but what happens is that you get a fresh reissue, and so, I mean, here's the deal: if you give it a couple days, it will recharge. So, generally, for most people, it's not a problem. If you're splitting hairs that tightly, I think that maybe you should just get a bigger instance. Basically, when you spin up the T2 small, you get 30. And you get 60 credits for the T2 medium and large. So they start off with a number. They don't start off at 0, because when you spin up a server initially, it will burn, it'll run 100% for a little bit while it's installing stuff and loading stuff and all that. And so they didn't want that to be a negative, so they start off with a credit. This isn't FileMaker. This is Amazon doing this. This was established way before FileMaker ever came to the table.
And there's a maximum, right? If you scroll over.
Yeah. They the more you pay Amazon, the more you get, right? One of those sort of things. So it's $288 for the small, $576, and $864. Once again, I don't think if you have a normal customer that runs less than 12 hours, these will recharge at night. They just will. If you run around the clock, then you're gonna have to watch this. Now, Margaret has a question here. The CNM instances do not. Yeah. So the question is about the CNM instances over here. It's hard to see this, and I kind of the red lines over the top of it. But there's a T2s here. These are the instances that FileMaker allows us to access. The C4 I used a lot during testing of this product. I love that instance. That's a good instance for 30, 40, 20, 30, 40, 50 people. I think you could probably run 20 people on a T2 large, depending upon how efficient your database is. But these other instances down below here, you don't have any credits to burn and that kind of thing. They're more money, right? But you don't have to worry about this. You can run them at 100% all the time if you want, but you're going to pay more, right? So, I mean, the price goes up basically. Well, the on-demand price goes up $100. Well, about $80 a month, but you can still get a C4 if you do a 3-year commitment for like $60. So that's pretty good. So it's just understanding, because the T2, for the vast majority of people, most people, what's your average FileMaker deployment size? Less than 20 people. The average, I think, is 15, right? So all those people are going to be living in a T2.
So all this stuff about credits and accumulating credits and burning credits, that's all just for the T2. For the others, that's not a relevant concept?
No, okay. Because you get 100%. It's like you bought the server. It's like you purchased it and you own it. Theoretically, you get to burn 100% if you want.
Great. We have another question here.
Okay, so let's talk about automated. It's not in here. Let's talk about automated processes that burn credits. Okay, at midnight, between midnight and 3 a.m., FileMaker Cloud tries to check to see if anyone's logged on. If no one is logged on, it will run a preserve backup. It'll snapshot the backup, but it's only saving the changes, the delta changes from the last backup. So if you change one record, that's less than what? How many bytes of data. That's how much the backup is. It doesn't make entire snapshots of files on every backup. It actually has just the bits that change, it saves, right? That's one thing. The second thing it does at midnight is it will actually restart the server. It takes the Linux server and restarts it. Just proactively, just to keep everything happy and healthy, it just proactively does that. That process will result in burning 80 or 90% for a couple minutes. And as a result, you will get a warning at the top of the instance. Let me see, RCC. There it goes. So I'm going to log on. All right, so you'll get these notifications up here, especially with the T2 small, that will say, hey, you've used 85% or 95% or whatever, and no one's been there. That's because in the middle of the night, the restart will burn it for like a minute. FileMaker is going back with future releases, and they're going to be modified. In fact, there it goes right there. These are from a couple hours ago when we were doing something. But you'll get these warnings that were over the 80, 90%. Those are kind of, in a lot of ways, misleading warnings. I mean, yeah, it went there briefly, but really it needs to warn us if it's there in a more substantial way, because the nightly restart will trip that alarm. But these notifications here, at least with the T2 small, are kind of misleading. With the bigger one, like T2 large, you never see it for doing that. But so the backups, if it has to answer the question, if you have a lot of data in the backup, it will burn a little bit, but not typically. because it's only saving the bits that change, not the entire file. It's pretty light. What trips it is at night with the restart. So there you go. It's a long-winded question, but there you go.
I think we have one last question. So the question is about, like, if you're downloading a snapshot or downloading one of the files, you're going to get into the transfer charges there. Does that have any impact?
So for example, today, this file in here is the equivalent of about 500 megabytes. And what it does, before it sends it to you, FileMaker Cloud zips it, which helps quite a bit. And it sends you the zip file. Is it 5 cents or 10 cents per gigabyte or whatever it is? It's a pretty minimal charge. I mean, if you're downloading gigs and gigs every day, then yeah, that might add up over the course of the month. But largely, when you upload, there's no charge. The download, there is a charge, and I think it's either 5 cents or 10 cents a gig or whatever it turns out to be.
Does zipping up those files, I can imagine that could burn CPU.
Yeah, anything you have the machine do, it's going to burn a little bit. But the problem is it's burning. I mean, once again, if you're splitting hairs to this level, I kind of went through this too. I went through this about a week ago, and I was like really crazily, I won't say the word anal, but kind of anal about every little CPU burn. And the reality is that you have to kind of look past that and look at the broad picture and see what the bank is doing. Yes, downloading it will cause a charge. Yes, anytime you have the machine do anything heavy, it's going to burn. The machine's doing stuff. Anything above 20%, it's going to ding that. Amazon is giving you a great deal in exchange for you not running it at 100%. That's what they do. And so it's the regulation of running it above 20%. It's automatic. I tried to actually run it down, is what I tried to do. And the problem is I was going to have to run all these machines with WebDirect going continuously for basically 8 hours or 7 hours or something for it to go down to zero. And I wasn't willing to sit here and stare at it that long. And so the reality is it takes a lot to run these down, I think is the point. But the goal with this presentation is that you know where to go in the console to see what's happening. Right? I can actually go in there right now. Let me go and do it one more time. So I log on to console. In fact, this is the main console we all recognize. You press EC2. These will get updated here. I have one running instance here as soon as it gives me that. I have my one running instance. I press monitor. And there's a whole bunch of charts here. And you go to the bottom one, bottom two, and you can see that it's been running backups, and I ran a download. Well, you don't see that. But I ran a download and did 500 megs and did all this stuff, and you don't even see it burp on this chart. Right. Because we downloaded it, but then it gave me 12 back every hour. So even over the course of this last 45 minutes, I've earned 8 credits or whatever. So the problem is that you have to really abuse it to get it to run it down, at least from the FileMaker perspective. So I mean, maybe it's a presentation about nothing, but I think people need to know about this. It's one way of knowing if this thing is dwindling down lower and lower and lower here, and it's down to like less than 100, I would be concerned that during the day you might run it out. So this is something to be aware of as a professional consultant or developer or FileMaker person. It's something you should be cognizant of. The reason these are cheap servers is because there's a trade-off.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard. That was very informative. I think everybody really got a lot out of it. All
right, so I'm going to take about a 60-second break, and then we're going to continue on with the people who are online talking about other stuff. So we'll see you. Thanks. All right, folks, so the FM Disk people have kind of left the building, and so we have a smaller group now, about 25 people or so, and we do have some additional questions. I'm happy to answer them, and we're looking over. Okay, so what's the question, Margaret? Can you help me with that?
All right, the first one is, how do you manage the backup? Do old backups get overwritten?
Yeah, so this gets into some of the conversation about the FileMaker Cloud in general. The short version of this conversation is that if you log on, the backups, it keeps backups every 20 minutes, and then it overwrites after a week with that group. The persistent backups, if we go to backups right here, these are the backups that are made every 20 minutes, okay? If that makes sense. And then these are the backups that run at night. We talked about between midnight and 3 in the morning. These are the preserved. These will never go away. This kind of pile up. These right here are the ones that are run every 20 minutes, and then after a week they're erased, or they're overwritten, shall we say. So I am willing to answer it's an open-ended Q&A period about FileMaker or Cloud or whatever you want to do. Feel free to answer questions here. So if we go back to the instance calculator right here, you get a T2 small, and you can get into it if you do a 1 year. Let's just work through the prices here, so you want to know the exact number here. Well, let's just say $13. I'm just going to round that up. So we got 13 for that. You got about $8 a month for the SSL certificate, so you're at 21. And then you're going to have about $4 a month, $5 a month in charges for storage, etc. And so I'm just going to say 5 right there. I'm going to round up. So T2 small with a 1 year commitment, you're at about $26 a month for the hosting. And then you've got the licensing of $888, right? And so the 26, of course, is times 12, or you could divide the $888, but that's really the two costs that you have. So because the $888 really is divided by 5 people, whatever. Give me $888 divided by 5. Okay, so that's $177 per person per year divided by 12. Divide that 177 by 12. Okay, so you got 14. The software cost is $14.80 per person per month. That's the way to calculate this stuff, is per person per month, I think. And then you got $26 is the server cost. Divide that by, well, if you divide it by 5, it's about $5. So your actual out-the-door cost is about $19.80 or so. $19.80 per person per month is about what it works out to be. So typically you buy the stuff annually, so you're going to have a one-time payment, but that's about what it is. So our Rick was asking about this, and so yeah, it's less than $60 a month. You're about hosting and software and everything with a 5-person group of people is about $19.80. Okay, so questions that we have. Yeah, okay, so I'll give you folks a quick update while the questions are coming in. So the SSL certificate, when you buy the SSL, now when I did the 1980 here, I worked in the cost of the SSL certificate. Now when you get the cloud initially, it comes with 90 days of free. The SSL certificate, it's the encryption over the wire. It certifies that it's safe and it's all scrambled, right? 007 secret encryption stuff, right? So it comes with 3 months for free, but in order to get it running after the 3 months, you have to pay for that. Now, part of when we set this up for customers, we make sure this gets put in there, but I added the $8 a month for the SSL. Now, if you have FileMaker Cloud running right now, don't panic, because we've got another month and a half before the SSL really has to be renewed, and my ace hitter, Jordan, is working with me on getting a video put together for that. All right, so the question is how do you get into FileMaker Cloud if you already have a volume license? So here's how this works. You have to have an annual license. So if you're the kind of person that buys it and then you don't buy upgrades for like 5 years or 5 releases, you can't use the FileMaker Cloud. The whole idea with Amazon is it's a subscription / rental / lease, whatever word you like there. You have to pay every year. In Amazon's case, you pay every month unless you prepay for a year. The whole idea is that you can't really buy an Amazon server. You're renting the big giant machine that's in the data center, right? You're renting this big giant machine here. Not of the whole machine, you're renting a tiny little slice of it. There could be 200 or 300, 500 people, different customers running on that one rack right here, each one of these racks, right? So the idea is that you need an annual license, AVLA, AFLT, or an annual site license. If you're on a perpetual license, we need to get you contacted to FileMaker and actually have that converted to an annual. The thing with annual prices is that you only pay 1/3 the cost of the product, but you pay for it every year. It's like an annual, it's like a budgeted line item that you have to budget for every year. And that's, with larger businesses, it's okay. The people that have a hard enough time swallowing this, the people with 1 or 2, 3 users, they're the ones that, because the entry-level position here is 5 users. Now, you can still buy FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server and buy it just for like 1 person, then the basic copy of FileMaker Server, and run your own server. You don't have to buy 5 for that. But if you want to use the FileMaker Cloud with Amazon, then you have to, the entry-level tier for that is 5 people. There's no 1-person tier for that. Okay, so the question is, if you go beyond 90 days on the SSL and you don't renew it, you're still going to log on, but you're going to get error messages that it's not a confirmed secure connection. So FileMaker Pro will continue to work. Go is supposed to continue to work with the error messages. WebDirect will not work with Safari at all. In fact, with Safari, you can't even log on to the admin console anymore. So the admin console that we have right here, you'd have to log on to it with a different different browser, I guess Google Chrome, but I know Safari won't allow you to actually connect because it considers it unsecure and dangerous. So if you kind of get yourself past the 90 days and you haven't renewed, you'll have to use Chrome and then set it up. Or you can just live with the warning messages. It's up to you. Here's the deal. Security's become a real big deal. It's like job one at FileMaker. They're really concerned about that. Not because there's necessarily any problems, but just because every day someone gets hacked. And FileMaker doesn't want to see their names of the company in the internet as being stuff hacked. So that's not good business. Apple as well, it's kind of the whole organization. They're very focused on security, and therefore they feel this needs to be a mandatory thing. That's why they gave you 90 days for free, because they want you to go and renew it. FileMaker's not making any money on that SSL certificate. They are doing it to encourage you to be safe and secure, to make sure your data is encrypted, right? So that's kind of important. The whole idea about this, and I guess I didn't really say it to the FMDisc people, and I probably should have said, is that you need to build the database or use a database that's really optimized. If you just open a box of FileMaker and you build it without any thought about performance, it's kind of a deal where you're going to probably build the solution twice. You're going to build it once to learn, and then you're going to realize it doesn't scale beyond 20 or 30 people because the performance load it puts on the server is so great. And then you'll build it a second time, probably with more performance optimized ideas in mind. That happened even with me. I mean, 26 years, and every year I'm learning new stuff. I mean, this stuff about the bursting and the CPU burn rate and the credits and stuff, I learned that a week ago. So I'm simply giving you the latest data that we have, because this stuff is evolving fast. But, you know, my first database when I was a junior person kind of struggling to learn this stuff was 1990, yeah. And so, you know, same thing back then. You learn it, and then you learn the way that kind of works, and then you learn later the right way of doing it. And our video course talks about performance. If you just go into the video course and type the word performance, all the videos that related to that will show up. If you don't have a good performance database, you're going to have to pay more for the server. So it's really one of those deals where the chickens are going to come home to roost. Have you ever heard that term? Or the cows are going to come home, or whatever. All the seeds that you've sown of bad seeds, of bad design, the word in the business, they call it technical debt. You've created debt that you're going to have to pay out later on. Now, a lot of people buy an oversized server because they're just buying some sort of Windows or Mac server, and they put it in their office, and they buy more than they need. They never really see it unless they kind of go above 20, 30, 40 people. But with the cloud, you can easily buy too much server or not enough. The T2 small, with a group of 10 people with a poorly designed database, the T2 small can't handle that at all. So you'd have to be at a T2 large, which means you're spending more money. So you're going to have to pay on that technical debt if you do that. It's not to discourage you in any way. This is just the reality of the road. It doesn't matter what platform that you build in. FileMaker gives you an unlimited ability to do anything you want. The upside to that is you have unlimited freedom, literally unlimited freedom. And so while you can do whatever you want. The downside is you can also do things incorrectly. Or let's put it this way. They're correct, but the things won't necessarily scale to 100 users, right? Starting point scales to 100 users. We did it the other day. We put on the big instance just to see what happened, and we had a user group meeting a month or 2 months ago, whatever it was, and everyone logged on, and we had 105 people or 104 people logged on to it. It'll do it. If I was hosting the solution I built in 1990 and say we had used the same techniques back then, probably wouldn't get above about 30 people before it'd fall over. And when I say fall over, the processor goes to 100%, stays there, because the server's working so hard to support those people. The goal is for the server to work as easily and as effortlessly as possible. So that's kind of the idea behind this FileMaker Cloud stuff. That's the latest with that. We got more questions down there. Last question. Larry's got a question. Do you set up FileMaker Cloud for users in their own name or as a reseller? Okay, so generally it's going to be the way we set it up. Okay, I'm just tell you what we do. If we set up the FileMaker Cloud, we're not going to front end it for you. We'll set it up for you in your name. So when we set up an account for the user, we're going to have the user go in and set up an Amazon AWS account. They're going to go over here. They're going to go over here, and they're going to set up their own account with their own credit card. Then they're going to need to share that with us, or otherwise somehow figure out, so we can log on their behalf and do all the tech stuff. Setting up the account and putting a credit card in is super easy. It's like buying something offline. It's Amazon, right? But the process of setting up the server is somewhat technical, especially the SSL is very technical. And so as a result of that, either we can log onto your machine and you can put the password in for us, or you can give us the password and then change it later if you want. But the point is that we're going to have to log on as you, help set up, and then you pay the monthly bill on your own credit card. You just pay us to assist in the setup for you. That's how we do it. And then the FileMaker licenses generally in the name of the end user company unless they buy a training bundle. So we got a couple people left here. If you want a deal and you want to also get our training, we can bundle together our annual training bundle with all our video courses and like a 5-pack or 10-pack for the cloud. And we can put it all together in one package at a really good price, like you'll save money kind of price. In that situation, if you buy our annual training bundle from us, the license is in our name, and then we're selling you a license, but the license will say learningfilemaker.com or something like that on it. So we can sell licenses. This is not a sales pitch. You asked the question. It's Larry's fault if anyone doesn't like me talking about this, but we can sell licenses in the person's name and set up for them in their name. It's all in their name, or we can do a bundle with our training and get a really good deal. And then in which case the name on that deal is learningfilemaker.com. We're basically pre-buying a block of these things and then selling them off as part of our bundle. We bundle the FileMaker copies or the cloud copies or whatever with our annual training. It's a pretty good deal. If you're interested in that, email support@RC Consulting, and it'll get to Ryan, who was sitting here, and he will get you quoted on that. Okay? So if we don't have any more questions, that's going to cover it this month. And so for now, that's it for us. We appreciate everyone. This is Richard Carlton signing off, and we'll catch you in the next video.